everyone, it's John Wheatcroft here yet again for week 7 of Sunday night Q&A sessions. So once again, I hope everyone's had a lovely week. I hope everyone's on the screen. Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I hope everyone's had a great week. You've been productive. You're making lots of music, and the lockdown's not driving you crazy. At least in England, it's different in different parts of the UK. The lockdown's been, some of the restrictions have been lifted slightly. So there seems to be a glimmer of hope of some return to slightly more something resembling normality. And with that in mind, I'm really pleased to tell everybody I had my first gig for months this afternoon, which was really, really lovely, with an amazing singer friend of mine, Asa Murphy, and his band, and we got to play outdoors, and it was great. It was really good to see everybody in the band. It was good to see that an audience that was receptive to live music, and it's kind of inspired me a little to think that because there is that thing, isn't there, you know, when you're thinking, like, are we ever going to get back to performing again? Are we going to get back to doing the things that we love? And of course, in the big scheme of things, you know, playing music is only one thing, and there's, you know, people's lives at stake and whatnot. It's not that important, but you know, these things they do matter, and it was really nice to get the opportunity to stick a 335 around my neck and turn an overdrive on and crank the amp and take a few solos and whatnot. It was great. It was good. Yeah, it's good fun. So I hope you have some similar experiences yourself, you know, where it's inspiring for things like practice, because, you know, if you've not got performances to stay in shape for, it's very easy to wonder what are you actually practicing for? What are you working towards? If for many of us, myself included, a huge amount of what I do, my focus to keep the guitar in my hands is based around the performances that are coming up. And when the diary is looking you know, empty in the near future, then there's a tendency to sort of to not be so pointed when you play. Now, as it is, what I've done is I've then sort of invented some things like performing a tune every week on Facebook, and then also recording, so that this sort of gives me some kind of direction to the kind of things I'm working on, because it's working towards things that I'm recording, particular compositions that I'm trying to complete and so on. But it's tough, you know, it is tough, and I know from some of the messages that I've had from some of you guys that it is quite a hard thing to keep the momentum moving forwards when you haven't got that regular thing of, you know, gigs or rehearsals or whatnot. Rehearsal rooms are beginning to start opening, and of course we can, you know, actually go around to people's houses now. We're allowed to do that, aren't we? So I've been doing a little bit of that as well, trying to get my my double bass electric upright chops together. That's a completely different new thing for me, and in some respects, the one thing the lockdowns allowed me to do is to spend a few months practicing something in isolation before I unveil it upon the public, you know, because I think I'd have been tempted to play in front of people maybe a little bit too early. So, you know, everything has a reason, I guess, you know, and you have to try and make the most of stuff. So anyway, without further ado, as is becoming the done thing, I'm going to play a tune for you. So this is another new tune. This is the third one, I think, that I will have played from what's going to be the next album, and it's a ballad, and it's quite long, so 5 minutes or so. So I hope you'll indulge me and allow me to basically just try out some ideas. It's by no means finished in terms of my involvement. All the other parts are done, but I'm just trying stuff out at the moment, and this is one of the things that I use this platform for, is a kind of a little bit of pressure, but in a positive way, to sort of to think about, you know, what do you go to, what does one go to when you don't have the option of stopping the tune midway through and correcting everything that doesn't work out the way you'd like it to. And that's kind of like what happens when you play live. Of course, when you practice, you can stop all the time, fix things and so on. So you do have that sort of freedom to make, to change your mind midway through, whereas in a performance, of course, as soon as you've done something, it's gone. Of course, you can change direction, but it exists and you have to react to what you've just done. So with this in mind, I'm going to play this tune. It's called The End of Every Road. And other than the melody sections, of course, are worked out. With this, I can honestly state that there's no, other than I know what the chords are, I don't have anything figured out, you know, for solos and whatnot. I'm just going to see how the chips fall. So here it goes. I hope you enjoy it. yeah, I hope you liked that. So that was a tune kind of repurposed from a session that I did a few months back. Well, maybe 6 months ago. Before, this is one of the things that dates back from before COVID-19 and hospital and all that horrible stuff. So thanks to Steve and Matty, who helped me put that together initially, and it was more kind of a band thing with drums and so on, but I've sort of repurposed it. And a lot of the time, you know, that's something that we can do. We can take fragments of ideas or even completed pieces and change the setting of them. So at the moment, this is steel string Selma style guitar, nylon string classical guitar. So that the two things are playing different parts to make this like super chord, like a big chord that sounds almost like a harp, and double bass courtesy of Mark Rose. Again, another wonderful performance. And I think I'm going to play archtop against it, and that's going to be sort of the template sound for the album. That's what I'm working towards, I think. So it's quite nice to have a sort of a consistent sonic blueprint that goes across the whole thing, rather than it sounding like 10 or it's going to be 12 tracks, I think, that are all recorded at different times. You know, I want it to kind of maybe sound like one thing, so that then the next thing, you know, assuming that you know, hopefully, you know, we get that far, of course, we'll have another, will be a different sound again, you know, and the sort of the breadth is hopefully in the compositions and also in a body of work, you know, so that when there's, so it's going to sound completely different to the first album, which is more steel string, Selma style, even though, you know, I'm not by any means trying to recreate any form of traditional gypsy jazz type of sound at all, even though I love that music. I think it's important to try and, you know, recognise all the things that make you who you are as a musician, and that for me is, you know, Django, Pat Metheny, John Scofield, Michael Brecker, Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, you name, they're all in there, you know. So to sort of ignore a huge portion of the music that you've been influenced by seems foolish to me. Unless, you know, you're doing something that's a particular project and it's meant to sound like a period piece and you're trying to sound like a hot club or whatever. And that's a different thing, you know. Or you know, you want to play, you know, completely authentic Chicago blues, or, you know, you want to play phenomenal, you know, Afro-Cuban music and you make it sound exactly like, you know, like a particular thing. You know, if it's your own music, then you can combine all of these things together and come up with your own thing, and that's totally cool. And in fact, that's what's interesting about it, you know. I think that's where these things are interesting. Of course, you know, everyone has their opinions and not everyone's going to like stuff. For some people, if you deviate too far from the norm, then maybe it's not authentic enough. But, you know, the objective is to not sort of please everybody else, but end up doing something that is disingenuous. You've got to be true to the things that you love and play music that genuinely inspires yourself. Because I mean, if ultimately you're not kind of digging it, then it's going to be difficult to try and pull that off and to maintain a career when you're playing music that you don't feel connected to in that way. Anyway, so enough of me philosophizing. Let's look at some of the questions for this week. But I hope you enjoy these tunes anyway. It's great for me to play them because it's a little bit of pressure, you know, as I've said a few times before. Like, we have to learn to deal with pressure. Like, if you want to be a performer in any way, shape or form, one of the things you've got to be able to cope with is being able to play in front of people, or in front of a microphone, or in this case in front of a camera. And it can be tough at times. I'm reading a fantastic book at the moment called The Pressure Principle, written from a perspective, so far what I've read, I'm a couple of chapters in, from the perspective of sports science, you know, and how these sort of coaches and motivational speakers can be exceptionally powerful, but they can also be in the wrong hands. Some of this information can be really damaging. So the chapter that that resonated with me the most, and I found quite helpful actually in playing this, was the idea about, you know, suggestive language and so on. So like if you say something, like if I say, you know, under no circumstances, you know, make mistakes or whatever, or don't mess this up, or don't screw up the B section or whatever, you're sort of planting a subliminal thought in your mind that you're going to screw up the B section or you're going to make mistakes. So it's better to maybe plant a more positive suggestion, and I totally got this, and I agree with it. I think it's right. It's hard though to plant positive suggestions of things that you can actually do rather than what you're trying to avoid. Plant suggestions of what it is that you're trying to actually achieve. So I was thinking, okay, just try and play. So the thought that went through my mind, and this ties in with what Milton asked me last week, what, you know, or something to talk about, and I'm aware of the fact that he'll have loads of fantastic opinions about this stuff as well. So by no means, by the way, I'm like claiming to be any kind of authority on any of this. I'm just sharing some ideas. But to plant a positive thought, I was thinking, okay, just try and play some beautiful notes. You know, pick some nice notes. And the other thing I was thinking, what I didn't want it to sound like was just don't. So this is a don't thing. This is about leave plenty of space. So I could say don't overplay, right? And that's a kind of a sort of negative glass half empty vibe, isn't it? As opposed to leave lots of space. It's essentially the same thing, but it makes a difference. And it kind of made a difference to I was kind of halfway through playing then, and I thought, I'm not really feeling any stress here at all. I feel like I can actually just play, even though I can see things coming up on the screen. I'm aware of the fact that people are looking at me. Right, so that's partially as well, and this is weird. The thought actually was going through my head as I was playing, thinking, is this because I performed in public today? Is this because I kind of like got rid of some of those nerves that we all feel inevitably when you play? And you know what it's like when you play. The first song or two, you might be a bit jittery, perhaps, but it's just a good thing if you can channel it into like a bit of energy, or also, you know, the just to give you the motivation to want to do well, you know, to make a performance good. Because, you know, particularly if you do this for a living, then sometimes there can be this thing where you go, oh, you know, another gig, another performance, so let's get this over with, you know. And you can have that kind of, like, you can take that kind of mindset onto the bandstand, and it generally doesn't produce the best results, you know. Whereas if there's a hunger there, which maybe is a byproduct of anxiety, you know, to say, okay, well, I really want to make sure that I play the best that I can play, you know, or try my best, you know, at this moment in time, then that's going to motivate you to dig a bit deeper, perhaps. But anyway, just ideas, anyway. But yeah, I urge you to check that book out. It embarrasses me to say I can't remember the author's name at the moment. But yeah, the pressure principle, and there's loads of other things that are similar to that, but that's the one that I'm looking at the moment. And it's amazing how just planting the seed of an idea, you know, use positive language, that's the seed of the idea. How that can sort of change the way you think about something. You know, so this performance a moment ago, you know, or the moment before I played, I'm thinking, leave plenty of space, try and play really pretty notes, you know, and hopefully I achieved that. Whereas if alternatively I'd have said, don't overplay and don't play any bummers, you know, don't play any, you know, don't make any mistakes or whatever, I guarantee I would overplay and make some mistakes. It's almost inevitable that's the case, you know. But anyway, so that hopefully that might be kind of like the first thing, and might fuel some opinions or comments or whatever. Please leave comments that, you know, if this stuff rings a bell, you know, then you know, please, you know, it'd be useful for me to know that, like, not necessarily everybody needs to be in agreement, but I find if certain things resonate, you know, there's some ideas that fall flat and don't, and then other things that resonate with you, which is why, you know, you have to find, you know, you can find, like, say, that with teachers. I'm sure there's plenty of amazing, you know, YouTube instructors or what have you, some of whom align with your vision as to what's important and the kind of things that you might like to do, and some of them don't, and consequently, you know, they will fall flat. But they'll be, for somebody else, you know, they might be the perfect person, you know, they might be absolutely right. So like all of these things, it's all very subjective, and and good that it is, you know, because it would be a very boring place if there was an absolute here, you know, if there was like this is the right way and it's the only way, you know. If that were the case, then there wouldn't be this, you know, just absolute, just, you know, complete enormous body of amazing art out there, you know, all of which is different and unique and in and of itself, you know, beautiful and worthwhile. But you know, there's room, you know, we have room, don't we? You can have AC/DC right next to Stravinsky, you know, in your iTunes if you want, you know, and there's room for all of them. And sometimes, you know, you're right in the mood for the Rite of Spring, and then other times you want to hear Back in Black, and it's all cool, you know. I suppose the issue with that, I guess, is where it can be a bit tricky is when it comes to making your own music. You think, well, okay, so your music doesn't sound sort of like bipolar or schizophrenic or whatever, you know, jumping about. You know, so 1 minute you sound like you want to be Angus Young, the next minute you want to be, you know, Larry Coryell or something. You know, then that's about making choices. That's about sort of prioritising things, and then maybe having a direction for that moment in time. And you can always change it. You know? You can always do something else. And if you listen to certain players, the sound has changed dramatically over the years. You know? Anyway, let's get on to some actual playing examples. So the first thing I wanted to look at today, I've had a couple of questions over the last few weeks, and I sort of like, apologies guys for not addressing some of these immediately, but I just had an inkling that they were going to join up, which is helpful to me. So I had one from Stephen talking about like rhythmic placement and how you can play phrases at different points and how you can comp in different points, rhythmically speaking. And then also Paul was asking about some Afro-Cuban rhythms and talking about tumbao bass lines and so on. And they're essentially the same thing, right? Like in terms of there's a similar skill involved, right? And one of the things that will often indicate someone is new or early on in their improvisational journey is when they employ the same rhythm or rhythms all the time. Very often nailed to beat one, right? And it's sometimes it's a clear indication of someone playing licks as well. I personally try and avoid it when I present licks in things like Guitar Techniques magazine. I make a conscious decision to, you know, here's 10 great blues licks. I would try to make them all start at different places in the bar, because if they all go 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, or so on, and they all start on beat one, it's kind of promoting that type of playing where all the rhythms align with beat one. And if you listen to great improvisers in any style of music, it's rare to hear that, you know, where beat one is so heavily employed. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with beat one. Beat one's fine, but it's one option in many, depending upon what rhythmic grid that we're in. So if we're in an 8-note rhythmic grid, and we want to sort of stay in the rhythmic grid, and we don't want to play things that are sort of out of time, then we've got 8 options. If we're playing 8-note triplets, then of course that multiplies. If we've got, you know, if we're playing 16th notes, 16, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're going to look at to begin with. Is so all of this could become one heading, and the heading is shift things away from beat one. Okay, so the first thing I want to look at then in this rhythmic section is 2 areas that I think will be beneficial for every musician to be aware of, particularly if you've got aspirations to play, you know, what might be loosely referred to as world music, or you want to play bossa nova or jazz or anything like that. Right, I would say get familiar with what clave rhythms are. So sort of get clave rhythms down, figure out what they are. Okay, that's definitely something that I would suggest. So that might be the first thing. We're going to look at that in a sec. I would also find some way to imagine rhythm away from your instrument, so that you can be practicing rhythm walking down the street, or, you know, brushing your teeth or in the shower or whatever, you can be running rhythmic ideas through your head. Wherever you have such desire to work on these things, you should be able to do it. You don't necessarily need the guitar in your hands. So the thing that I looked at recently, well, relatively recently, maybe a year or two ago, was Carlock, the Indian rhythmic singing. And again, I don't profess to be any kind of an expert at this, but even just the little that I'm aware of, I found to be extremely helpful. So a really great exponent of these kind of ideas, John McLaughlin, from a guitar perspective. And there's a brilliant video that he's done with a guy called Salva Ganesh Vinayakram, called The Gateway to Rhythm. And that's really fantastic, and you can probably find it if you go looking in the obvious places, you'll find it. I bought it, and then it lived on the bedside table for a couple of years, because I knew as soon as I watched this, then there goes the next few years of practice. Coupled as well, and it's definitely now's a good opportunity to mention the genius that is Pete Zeldman. I studied with him and periodically continued to do so. He's an incredible drummer, fantastic drummer, but he's just an amazing musician. The fact that he happens to play the drums doesn't make any difference, to be honest. Like any of those ideas, they all transfer. So I've got no aspirations to play the drums, so why am I studying with a drummer? Well, because he's got the clearest perception of rhythm, in my opinion, than any other human being on the planet, and it's so clear that he can have multiple things going on at the same time. So be thinking of this and this and this all consecutively, and it's a bit like the gears are all kind of synchronized. So whereas if you're not so kind of clear, then they all mesh up and they all kind of pull into one another, and you think it's this and you're being pulled into that. So whereas Pete has got this immense clarity, and I'm sure sees all these things as one, whereas so you can be doing something that on the face of it is an immensely complicated or complex rhythmic puzzle, but it never comes across like that, and consequently it sounds relaxed, and it's like the most natural thing in the world. So I'm going to share just some basic ideas. So this is something as well, I'm also at pains to include some stuff that's more kind of simple and direct, although the ramifications of this can be far-reaching, and they can take you a long way. So, okay, so let's make sure that we know what a clave rhythm is. So you might know a clave rhythm as 5 beats spread against 2 bars, and it's usually expressed as this rhythm. Okay, so that, you might know that, it's a Bo Diddley rhythm. Faith by George Michael, isn't it? That's what that is. So what you've got is 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that's expressed as if it's in 8th notes. Now, which is often the way that it's looked at if you're looking at Latin or Afro-Cuban rhythms across 2 bars. Now, in things like funk and in jazz and certain fusion and so on, you can see that as being a 16th note rhythm, moving at twice the speed, essentially. So instead of it being 1, 2, and, it's going to be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. So it's going to be that. Okay, but in either way, what we can do with both of these things, whether it be in 8th notes or 16th notes, we can kind of divide it in the middle. So we have this section, the part that goes 2, 3, 4, ba, ba, ba. That's the first bar. And we call that the 3 because there's 3 beats within that. So we'll call it a bar for now. We'll treat it as if it's 8th notes. So 1, 2, and 3, 4. That bit, yeah. And then there's the 2 section that goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the order of this is sometimes referred to as song clave, and speak to your drummer friends. Like buy them a pint and ask them about clave rhythms. They love talking about this stuff. So this is like as common for drummers as knowing what the pentatonic scale is for guitar players. And there are parallels, of pentatonic scale, 8 notes in a diatonic scale, root to root, and you pick 5 of them, So there are certain sort of things that you can, connections that you can make between note selection and rhythm selection. We'll get to this when we get to rhythms like Bembe, which is 7 hits in the space of 12, which is what the major scale is. It's 7 notes within the space of 12 possibilities. And interestingly enough, the space in between them is the same, right? Like if we think of a tone as being a note followed by a rest and then another note, as opposed to a semitone being a note and then a note right next to it. But anyway, that's a subject for another day, but we'll get to that. Bembe rhythms, another one of those rhythms of the earth, if you like, where, you know, like the pentatonic scale, it's something that just, it's in every culture, and you hear it everywhere. And you hear Clave in Beatles songs, and Metallica rhythms, and Paul Gilbert's shred riffs, just as much as you're going to hear it in you know, Buena Vista Social Club. But anyway, so what we do in this particular, those Afro-Cuban rhythms, traditional Afro-Cuban and associated with things like tumbals and so on, is the 3 and the 2 is often flipped around. So instead of it being ba, 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 1, ba, ba, it becomes this. Boom, ba, 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 1, 2, ba, 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 ba. So what that means is the sort of the rhythmic stresses and emphases are not on beat 1. Right? So that's the first kind of tricky thing when listening to this music, where you might go, where's the 1? Right? Because we're expecting it to be like a powerful downbeat. And this is what sometimes happens in styles of music like jazz. Very often in jazz, you know, you can hear like a strong beat and it's on the and of 4. And it makes us feel like as if that's the 1, you know, the and of 4 can sound like the 1. But we'll get to that in a moment. So this is like a typical, what we might call a 2-3 clave pattern with some embellishments. There's a great app called Drum Genius. It's got lots of these type of patterns in. So yeah, this is 2-3 clave. I've started from the start of the pattern so you can hear. Ba, 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 1. 1. 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. Now, kind of a fairly typical tumbal bass line comes in on the and of 2 and beat 4. So it goes 1, boom, ba, boom, 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 ba, 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, and 4, 1, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom. So if you're into AC/DC, right, which I am too, you're going to be so used to the bass line going boom on beat 1. So when it actually doesn't, and it does this, 1, boom, there's a tendency to think, oh, that's the downbeat, or where is the 1? So we're going to play, in this case I'll play, that's a bit loud. Okay. I'm just going to play a little example bass line. 1, ba, ba. And I'll do G minor. So the notes are going to be the 5th, the D, the octave, the G, the 5th, and the root. Okay, and what a really good thing to do is to clap the clave and sing the bass line. While stepping as well, you know, so a really a good thing to do with this is to move around, you know. I know it sounds like I'm asking you to do like, you know, some Strictly moves or whatever, but just to kind of move around to the music. There's a brilliant video on My Music Masterclasses by the drummer Bob Moses, Rackalam Bob Moses. He's the drummer who plays on Bright Side's Life, the Pat Metheny record, and loads of other things, but that's, for many guitar players, you'll know him through Pat Metheny, although he's got an amazing, far-reaching career, you know. And he talks about that, listening to new music, and if you can't dance around the room to it, there's no way you can play the drums to it because he doesn't understand it. You know, he hasn't felt where where are the natural stresses and where's the natural pullbacks and where do things push forward. So he moves around, and I've experienced that with two incredible teachers, Bosco de Oliveira, who's a great Latin percussion, Brazilian. He would challenge me, say Latin music, no, Brazilian music is what Bosco teaches, and Pat Davey, who's an absolute kind of like repository of knowledge. You know, he knows a lot of stuff about this, and he has people up dancing. You know, the drummers like come in, right, okay, get up. You're going to be kind of moving around to this stuff, and the first inhibitions kick in. You think, oh, I've got to dance to this stuff. It feels weird, but then once you kind of break, once that's broken down, you realise it's the best way to get these rhythms into your subconscious. You know, so that you're not necessarily having to think about them too much. You know, and I'm sure that, you know, if players who play this music frequently, for them they're just going to hear going down, and if you say it's not the and the two, they're like, I don't know, I'm just playing that's what the rhythm is, you know, rather than counting it, thinking it out as if music is something that it's intellectualized. It's not, you know. But sometimes it's helpful to think things out initially to then get them in, plant the seeds, and then let the subconscious pick them up later on. So the principle of this first part is playing things that are not on beat one. Right? That's what we're talking about here. So if we go to a more sort of jazz type thing, so I'm going to go to, and this is medium swing, and I'll just pick a medium swing rhythm. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and I'll play like a 2-5-1. Right. So what I'll do now, I'll play E minor 7 flat 5, A7, D minor, and I played A7 sharp 5. So I played a D minor 9. So maybe we'll play them on B1 just so that we hear B1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. Now I'm going to play on the and the 1. 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1. So this is a really simple thing. Maybe the and the 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Pick a different spot. Let's pick B2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It's got a kind of downward type feel. 3, 4. Even though it's not on the 1 or 3. It's not as upbeat as this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2. So make sure you can hear and access 1, 2, 2, 1, 2. And then we try B3. 1, 2. It's square, but it's okay, you know, we need to know it. 1, 2. And the 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now sometimes a combination of downs and ups is going to sound cool. So maybe now I'll go B1 and then the and the 3 perhaps. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 2, 3, and 2, 3. Works, yeah? Maybe I'll go the and of 1 and the down of 3. That's 1 and 2, 3. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 4, 1 and 2, 4, 1 and 2, 4, 1 and 2, 4, 1 and 2. Making sense? So this concept of being able to hit any of the points in the bar, rhythmically speaking, is quite useful. There's a sort of a tipping point. Like when we start talking about things like and the 4, like we have to ask ourselves, it depends what you played before it actually. Like, is the and of 4 an early anticipation of the next bar, or is it the first bar later? So meaning if I was going to play something on 1, 2, 3, 4 and at that point. Right? Is that, so in this instance of these three chords, would I go E, 2, 3, 4, E half diminished at that point? Or would that be an early anticipation of the A7? Would it be going 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 2, 3, 4, boom, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, like so? Or is it late? But you know, and these are things that you can play around with. But this concept of being able to drop stuff in at different points is really cool. So the clave thing, right? I would suggest that you work on these clave rhythms, right? So again, to remind you, they are. This is song clave, or the reverse, the 2/3 is. Okay, now a great way to work on these is to treat them as picking accents. So if I play a note, I'll just play the note as C, and you can play with no accent, as much as it's possible for a human being to play with no accent. Okay. So now I'm going to play and I'm going to go. So hopefully you can hear the 3/2 clave there. Or the 2/3. Okay, now I'll put that into something more complex now. I'll go. First one was 3/2, the second one was 2/3. So I'll take a lick like, you know, arpeggio type thing, go up the arpeggio, down the scale, like the Panathini exercises book. So that's accented in groups of 4. Here it is now played with 3/2 clave. Let's say you take these kind of like jazz lines that if you played them like stiff, they're going to sound like a robot, right? But where you put the accents, you know, ba 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 ba, that's what's going to make this stuff swing, you know, and feel like as if it's actually got some ebb and flow. So that's a great exercise, you know. So I'm taking this exercise arpeggio thing, and in this case I'll do 3/2. Sense? Of course, you can apply this to anything. I'm just using this as an example. So if you've got these extremes of semiquavers, again, remember what I'm saying here. Sometimes these things are presented as a 2-bar rhythm, you know, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. But in reality, certain styles of music that are more semiquaver based, you'll squash the rhythm down so it all happens within 1 bar. So that's the first thing, I'd say, rhythmically. Try and get comfortable with what clave rhythms are all about. There's loads more than that, by the way. It's not just the song clave, but that's a great place to begin. It's like pentatonic scales. You know, you got to start with the minor pentatonic before you start looking at, you know, hybrid kind of mutations and variations. You want the most sort of common ones under your fingers first. So start with song clave, and then take it from there, and we can revisit these. If people are interested in this stuff, let me know. You know, again, you know, please leave some comments. It's really helpful for me. In fact, it's impossible without them. You know, because I don't want to. The shape of these sessions is based upon like a two-way feedback from the kind of things that you want to hear about. So for me, there's no fun in it if it's just me picking subjects at random, because for all I know, they may not be things that people are interested in. So this is a good way for me to discover where the common ground is as well, because in some instances I get the same questions asked by more than one person, which is great because it's like, okay, this is something that's maybe a universal concept. Okay, so with the same thing to do with rhythmic placement, we're going to take something now that's super basic, but again, it has far-reaching implications. So this is to do with taking phrases and playing them in different places, like moving them around. So, like you can move stuff to different areas of the neck, we can play musical ideas and move them to different locations in the bar. We can move them around. Okay, so I'm aware of the fact that times, just where does time go? It's not so fast. Okay, so again, another app. I feel like I'm an Apple representative today. That I like to use this thing called Loopy, and I've got no end of loop pedals or whatever, but it's really, really easy, and it's on your devices, and you can carry it around with you. You've got one in your pocket usually. Okay, so I'm just going to record a little back in. Okay, that'll do nicely. Okay, so you have to tap the tempo in. About 80 something. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. And then you put in a number of bars. I'll do that. That'll do like that. Yeah, we'll do 4 bars. Yeah, that could work. Okay, so I'm going to put a little groove. So now record, we'll put it in C minor. Okay, 2, 3. Okay, so there's our C minor groove. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to keep this really, really basic, although remember every idea can be done with every idea, if that makes sense. So, meaning the tools that I'm going to throw at this, you can throw at more complex musical phrases. So I'm going to just take C minor pentatonic scale. Okay. Now, at some stage in every musician's development, you're going to learn some patterns. Okay. So, like a pattern might be, say, playing in groups of 4. So things like. Kind of thing. So let's work on the assumption that you've got something like that down, and you can play double speed. And that's something that you're comfortable with. Okay. But what tends to happen with these things is they tend to, like the thing I said before, they tend to get lined up with beat 1. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. But they don't have to be. Like the way that we said before, our rhythms could go there or one. There could be any one of those 4 places at any point within the bar. So there's like 16 possible start points. So just for the sake of brevity, we're going to treat it as if we're only going to really concern ourselves with beat 1, right, of a 4 beat bar. So my 4 spots are going to be so the 1, and conventional kind of naming for these things we call that beat 1. Then we move it to the second 16th note, 1E, 1E, could be there, or 1E and 1E and 3, 4, 1E and 3, 4, 1E and, like so. And or the 1 and which is 1 3 4 1 I realise it's really strange watching yourself clap on a screen in front of you when it's out of time. So I'm not going to look. Right, if I'm looking away from the camera, it's just because I don't want to see an image of myself clapping a few milliseconds later than I'm actually doing it, because it's really disconcerting. So if anything's out of time, it's that's doing it to me. Okay, so what this means is this phrase of 4s can be played from 4 different spots. Okay, so 1. So here it is. In fact, I'm going to do this in 8 notes to begin with. So first one is going to be right on the beat, and I'll just play a little fragment of it. 2, 3, 4. next one is going to be on the and, because it's with an eighth notes, remember. 3, 4, 1. There's a whole different vibe to it because the accents land in a different place. Then the next one will be on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And the final one will be on the and of 2, or we can pull it forward. So we have a choice here. We either play it on the and of 2, like this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Or we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now all of this that I've just played, I'm now going to play double speed on the beat. 3, 4. Okay. 1 E. 2, 3, 4. Okay, syncopate. Now on the and. 2, 3, 4. 1 E. Got it. And now I'll do this on the 1 E and I'll do it on the end of beat 1. 3, 4, 1 They're all exactly the same notes, they're just played in a different place. Okay, so now I'm going to do something else with this. So I'm playing a 4-note phrase, but I can play this grouped in 3s. Okay, so even though it's a 4-note phrase, I'm going to play this now in triplets. So imagine there's only room for 3 notes per beat. So that means that each time I play the new phrase, it's pushing into the next part of the beat, or the next part of the it's going to be in the next beat. So I'll play this in 8th notes again. So the phrase is not the same as the rate. So half time. So that's going to give me. Actually, now that this is worth talking about, because if I'm going to play this half time, we're going to end up with crotchet triplets. I'm actually going to play it faster first, so it's easier for you to hear. Right. It goes over the beat. It's the same phrase again. 3, 4. And again, with this, I could move this to now each of the 3 start locations. So it's either going to start here, triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, that kind of thing, triplet. Or triplet. So now, if we get onto the idea of playing 3-note phrases, again, these could be played in triplets, of course. I mean, who hasn't played that, like, you know, Thin Lizzy and all those kind of things when I was 14, you know, I just love those kind of phrases. But they can sound a little bit, particularly at this speed, obvious. So if I play this now, I'm going to change the rate now. I'm going to play a 3-note phrase, but going back to our 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, going back to that speed. So that is the rate. The phrase going 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. In Carlock that would be taquita. So there we go. Taquita, 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 taquita. So you can hear that my phrase is going. Tac, across the beat, it's cross rhythmic. So it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Again, who says it has to start on beat 1? So this is starting on beat 1. Why not? Or 1 or 1 and. Everything that I played here is exactly the same phrase, just in a different place rhythmically. By the way, if you're interested in the idea of playing crotchet triplets, one of the things you can do is da 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 da. You can play this, right? I play it on one note and go. So what I might do is play the same note on 2 different strings and go. Now I'm only going to play the lower string on this. You get half the rate, so you're not going to get crotchet triplets. Instead of going, so imagine on 2 beats, and you're going 3, 4. So that's one of the ways of doing it. Or alternate picking, just using the downstroke. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an extra thing here, which is how you can take those simple patterns, the 3s and 4s, and you can use them to develop odd rhythmic groupings, like what you might hear Eric Johnson or Joe Bonamassa play, or amazing jazz musicians like Wolfgang Muthspiel, who plays with Mick Goodrick. He's got some fantastic rhythmic ideas, loads of groups of 5 and stuff like that. It's really, really cool, but using them in a really super way. Okay, so what we can do here is we can take the 4 and we can take the 3, and we can take those sequences and we can combine the 2 together. So if you're comfortable with this, I'll do these in 8th note rates. So I'll do both a phrase of 4 and a phrase of 3, taken through the whole scale. So the 4 sounds like this. And the 3 sounds like this. So I'm not playing in triplets, I'm playing a phrase of 3, played at a rate of, in this case, 8 notes, so it's being played like 3, but in the rate of 2. There's 2 things happening in every beat. My phrase has got 3 notes in it. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the phrase of 4 and the phrase of 3 to give me a phrase of 7. Okay. But I'm still going to maintain the same speed entirely. It's still going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's just that my phrase consists of 7 notes. Okay, so I'll play that through the whole scale, and you'll see what I mean. I'll play it first. 3, 4, and. Faster rates. 1, 2, 16th note rate. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, of course, that doesn't have to be played on beat 1. I can go 1 and a 2 and a 1. of course, I'm as a teaching device sticking to groups of 4 and 3 here, but it could be anything you want. It really could be. It could be 2 4s and a 3, 2 3s and a 4, a 4 and 3 and a 5. Really anything you want, you know. It could be, and in any scale as well. You know, it could really be anything you want. And you can play that, and let's do it. Try triplets now. So now I'm going to change the rate. So the rate now is going to be 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet. So I'm going to play 7, but in triplets. So that's going to be da ba do do ba do do da ba do boom ba boom boom. This kind of thing. So that was that was septuplets, sextuplets, sixes. So then I was playing a pattern of 7. Well, 6 things were happening per beat. So what that means is my pattern pushes into the next beat. So the loop, right? So maybe if I stick, I'll do it half that time, but I'm only going to stop on the first 2 strings. I'll just loop the first 2 strings, right? So you're going to get da ga da da ga da. That's our pattern. 1 triplet, 2, that kind of thing. And I'm going to go. Goes across the beat. In Carlock, that would be taka dimi taki taka dimi taki, that kind of thing. So they would put a syllabic representation for taka dimi, takita for 3, and then loop that round and round. But it goes across the beat. The idea is not to cram that in to one beat, which is a kind of like a targeting thing. So we have 7 notes in one beat, which is where you see that in notation, where you see the 7 in the time of 4 or 7 in the time of 6 or whatever, depending upon the rhythmic grouping that you're initially dealing with. This is going cross rhythmically. It goes across the beat line, if you like, the kind of. So much the same as you can have rhythms that go across the bar line, you can have rhythms that go across from one beat into the next. So I'm hoping that is going to give you something to consider. I'm aware of the fact that we've already gone over time and I'm kind of halfway through. So I'm going to delay until next week some of these other topics. One of them, the things we're going to look at next week, is a great question from Tony to do with how to hear what you play, how to work on that connection between what you play, the fingers moving around, and what you might imagine. I think this stuff, you could apply this to everything we've done today. So being able to hear what does if you're thinking in the 16th note rhythmic grid, just pick 3 numbers. Go okay, the 3rd one, the 9th one, and the 12th one, and write it out. Go okay, what would the 3rd 16th note be? Okay, that's going to be the and of beat 1. How does that sound? The 9th one would be the downbeat of beat 3. Yeah, right, and the 12th one would be the last 16th in beat 3, and then figure out 1 and 2 and a 3 and that's what that's going to sound like. 1 and 2 and work it out in your head. You don't necessarily need the guitar to do that, and that's going to really help you when you're trying to make everything lock in. So for example, the first thing we were looking at, where you have the clave is going 1 2 3 1 2 3, but I don't know if the penny's dropping now, but the tumbal bass line is actually going 1 2 and 3 4, right? Neither of which of those notes coincide with the 2 3. So what you've actually got is 1 2 and 3 4 across both. So if you could imagine one rhythm is going 1 2 3, and the other rhythm's going 2 and, so you've got 1 2 and 3 4. That's what's happening across the 2 instruments. 1 2 and I can't look at myself. It's really you get 1 2 and 3 4. If you play that on one source, you're going to get 1 da 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 ga ga ga, and that's what's off-putting, is because the overall rhythm, the composite of both of those parts, gives you another rhythm. Da ga 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 the thing is it's spread between two instruments. So what you could do to imagine this is you could make that two different notes. So you could imagine that the low, boom, boom, is a note, and the one, boom, ba, make that just one new note, and play that as a polyphonic, polyrhythmic, if you like. Although they're both in the same time, so it's not necessarily a polyrhythm, but a polyphonic expression of rhythm. That would be the best way to imagine that. And that's something that we do all the time with things like fingerstyle guitar. So sometimes you might think, why would you learn all this stuff? Because you think surely this is drummers. This is like the drummer's job, and the reality of it is it isn't. Rhythm is everybody's responsibility. I know plenty of great guitar players who don't know the names of all the scales. Some of them don't even know the names of the notes, but they sound great because they've got a really great rhythmic sense. I don't know any good guitar players, right, who don't have great rhythm, right? It's impossible to be, I've yet to hear one, who has not got a good command of rhythm, because you can play all the right notes, but if the rhythm's sloppy, it just doesn't work, So the rhythm is arguably, the most important thing. It's certainly the thing that most people pick up upon, I would say. There's plenty of times, where you might play a note and it's not the note you intended. But the first question is, how does anybody know what note you intended? If you're playing a well-known piece, and it is a piece, then sure, maybe people can tell if it's a mistake. But if you play a note in an improvisation, and that note maybe doesn't work, or it's not the one that you meant it to be, well, first off, there's a more than 50-50 chance you're going to get lucky and it's going to work anyway. And secondly, if you work on how to resolve those notes, so that when you play a major third over a minor chord, we know which way it could go to make it sound right. That's not that disastrous. But if you play something that's completely rhythmically sort of against the grain, unless it's an intentional thing, or if the rhythm's just not working, then everybody notices that, I think. Or if you fluff the rhythm, lose the beat or whatever, then pretty much everyone's going to pick up on that, I would think. So it's definitely something that I think we guitar players could benefit from working on. So we will continue along similar lines, I'm sure, in up and coming weeks. Once again, thank you so much for your attention, and if you've got this far, thanks for sticking with it. I'm hoping that there's some fuel that you can use to fire your musical ambitions, or there's something there that you could employ in some way, shape or form to find something creative. By all means, these are not absolutes as well. They're just ideas, and ideas can be used and they can be interrogated. I don't, and I question some of the things that I take as axioms or whatever, and then realise later on that maybe they're not quite as absolute as you might think. And sometimes good to challenge the norm and challenge convention. So long as we're making music and we're having interesting conversations, then count me in. So please keep sending any requests, observations, likes, shares. They're all helpful. It all makes the world go round and makes it possible for me to continue doing this. Have a great week. Take care of yourself. Don't go crazy in the pubs and restaurants. I know they're all open. So take care, look after yourself, and I will see you here same time next week. Take it easy. Bye bye.